Welcome back to The Real Deal with Empire, the show where real estate gets real. I'm your host, as always, Ali Fawaz, and we're diving into the legal side of the game with someone who knows the rules, writes the playbooks, and keeps the deals from blowing up at the 1 yard line, if you will. Yeah. Ali Dagher is a respected real estate attorney based in Dearborn, Michigan. He's got over 3 decades of experience navigating contracts, resolving disputes, and making sure that people don't get burned in the biggest transactions of their lives. He's worked with everyone from first-time buyers to seasoned investors. And if there's a landmine that's buried somewhere in the deal, he's going to find it, that's for sure. Yeah. So let's get into it. Yes. Everything you thought you knew about the legal side of real estate and what you absolutely need to know, straight from one of the best in the business, Ali Dagher.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure. If I look at real estate, I see it as a conglomeration of multiple things, to be honest with you. One, at the end of the day, the transaction between a buyer and a seller or whomever else is involved is a contract. Yeah. And in the contract, you basically have to be able to, understand the elements that are necessary and are needed in the contract. And it's simple. You need consideration, you need the parties, you need the terms and conditions to modify whatever you want to modify. But that's not the only thing about real estate that's important. What I like about real estate is that it's sort of a history lesson. And you're going back in time to see what that property did, what happened to it. Yeah. And particularly we need to dive into the title sometimes. And that's what I find really interesting is that you see names on titles in terms of the legal descriptions. Like, for example, for Silverman, right? There's a Silverman estate in Dearborn Heights in which a huge parcel of real estate is called Silverman. Well, it's a Silverman family. Yeah. And I actually met the grandparents or the grandkids of that family because they sold where the Dearborn Fresh is right now. That's the lot that they sold. So they're the ones that actually developed it. Their name was on it, and it was fascinating. But the point is that real estate involves not just the dynamics of a contract, but it involves history, it involves relationships, and it involves interest. And, as a practitioner, what you want to do is just like a real estate agent, you sort of want to go through your checklist. Mm-hmm. And if you follow your checklist and you look for the specific things within that checklist, over a period of time, you develop very good instincts about it. And that's how you build a foundation for becoming an effective lawyer on the transaction side. I keep saying this, but I say this a lot. You really cannot be a good lawyer without understanding the courthouse.
Yeah.
You sort of have to be in court on a regular basis to really understand the drafting of agreements. Because at the end of the day, the agreement's nice to have on paper, but what is the judge is going to do about it, right? Mm-hmm. What is a judge is going to do about the language that you use, and how is it that's going to be interpreted what they mean? So if I'm advising young lawyers, I'm telling them, one, make sure you understand the law, obviously. Make sure you have a checklist available to you. And always think about, you're standing in front of a judge. In court, there was an older judge, he retired. He was the chief judge in Wayne County Circuit Court. His name is Robert Colombo. Great judge. He was around for 35, 40 years. He retired like 10 years ago. Whenever I argue, whenever I write something, I think of myself and say this: what would Judge Colombo say? How would you convince Judge Colombo this is what this means? And it's something that you keep in mind as a lawyer, and something that you experience. And the other parts of the law that people don't understand has to do not only with contracts, but title searches, but also zoning, right? If I'm drafting an agreement for someone, one of the first things I do is I go through a checklist of things, identifying what those are. How you structure a deal sometimes depends on what is it that you have to do during due diligence? A lot of folks think that they can do something in a particular piece of property and not understand that it may not be properly zoned for it. Mm-hmm. And you'd be shocked how often that happens. Wow. And you'd have to explain to that particular person what that zoning means, whether it's a conditional zoning or whether there are other things that are going on in the background. And you have to be able to, do other things. So there's so much to share about the subject.
I'm sure. Oh, yeah. There's plenty.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Let's take it in a different step potentially, right? Like, you've worked with both residential and commercial clients, I'm assuming.
Back up a little bit. Yeah. I was, people don't know this, but I was one of the real estate agents with the first Arab American owned real estate company in town called G&B Realty. in 1986.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, there was a company that was owned by Hassan Beydoun. Hassan Nadim, I think it's Nadim or something like that, Beydoun, his father's name. And Sam Beydoun, the realtor, Sam Beydoun's older brother, he was the king. And he ran the first Arab American owned. Sam Beydoun and I actually worked there. And it was located on Ford Road, ironically not far from my office. And he was a good agent. Mm-hmm. He was one of the people that was instrumental in beginning to bring Arab Americans into the gas station business, and and develop a market for it and be able to train people and so on. But he had a great operation. That's how I first learned about real estate law. I was 18, 19 years old, and it's dynamic. It's a wonderful field to be in. I mean, I applaud the really good agents that know what they're doing, because they really do serve a very special purpose. They make things easier for people. The good ones would explain and be blunt and be honest, and do what's in the best interest of their particular client. So my first real job, I mean, I've had a lot of other jobs, but my first real job was a real estate agent, and that actually helped me pay for college.
Nice.
And it was great. It's a great opportunity. It's a great job.
It really is. And I think you hit it on the head. The good real estate agents are the ones who are doing it with the intention of, I'm helping somebody.
Yeah.
I'm helping somebody, especially when you think about the purchase of a home.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the biggest purchases you're going to ever make in your life. It's
Yeah.
usually a home or a car. Like, these are big emotional decisions people are making. And if you're able to hold their hand and position yourself as, and understand you are the subject matter expert, meaning they're looking to you
To figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
And
they
so
trust your
important.
advice for it. And, my parents we came to this country in the late 70s, and they bought their first home in 1982. Mm-hmm. We moved in, and right before, I actually went to the closing of that house. I was in high school. My parents didn't speak very good English, so I was helping them translate. Oh, you should have seen the joy on my parents' face, and my father and my mother's face. It was amazing how happy they were that they finally owned a home. And that's something you're never going to forget, especially for first-time home buyers, and and people who it's a part of the American contract. I mean, people don't realize history, but Ali, if it wasn't for the home ownership of Americans, this country would have been a really bad shape. And if it wasn't for the covenant that, let's say, Franklin Delano Roosevelt made, that got us out of the Depression and was able to keep communism away, it's fundamentally part of it. If somebody owns a home, right, somebody's not likely to be, they want to take care of it. They want to be part of their community, and they want to be able to be part of civil society. They want to be able to do things. And the point is that real estate agents help in that process to bring it forward. And a good one really is able to give the best deal, the best option, and be able to give them the opportunity to make the best decision, which you're right, it is the biggest decision they've ever made.
Well, I mean, you touched on something that, that's part of the American dream, right?
It is the American dream.
How do you feel, and I think this is pretty relevant right now,
Yeah.
it's becoming a lot more difficult to live the American dream and own your own home. Yeah. Where do you see this going? How do you feel about what's happening in that realm and what needs to happen?
I see, look, the problem with society sometimes is that people don't understand cycles in American history. Mm-hmm. This isn't something new. I'm afraid, but I'm not that afraid, because I've seen worse. I've studied worse, I've studied worse. And it's we're experiencing the information technology, and we're experiencing the onset of two major technologies at the same time, which I think is going to revolutionize the entire world. And I can spend 3-4 hours explaining it to you, or talking about it, I should say. But it really is phenomenal. You've got the advent of quantum computing, the ability to be able to be able to get a computer to solve problems, or to be able to compute problems at a level where no one can yet comprehend. I mean, Google 6 months ago was able to solve a problem that would have otherwise taken 1,000 years for the computer. And Google scientists speculate that the entanglement of the protons could have occurred from different universes. I mean, stuff that I don't even understand, that Einstein used to call fuzzy math. That's one computer, that's one evolution that's coming, and one revolution. It's not going to be an evolution, it's a revolution. The other revolution that's coming is the advent of AI.
It's not coming. It's here.
No, well, I mean, here's the problem.
It's continuing to develop.
It's continuing to develop.
And
Okay, but
redefine itself.
exactly. But here's the problem from what I see, and people I think perhaps are giving too much hype to AI. It's like they gave a lot of hype to electric cars 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if people don't understand this, but for a computer AI program to work,
Yeah.
you need a lot of water.
Yes.
You need a lot of water for the cooling systems, for the air conditioning system. You also need a lot of electricity. There's not sufficient electricity in the electrical grid of the world to support what they think AI can do.
Is that right?
Yes. Look it up. You're looking at creating, I don't remember what it is, but you're looking at creating several megawatts of electricity to be able to sustain any type of AI that can go beyond, 30 days of memory. Their goal is 6 months of memory, and they're looking at 500 kilowatts. And where are you going to get the water? Where on earth are you going to find that kind of water? And I have two wonderful kids. One of them is graduating law school, is going to take the bar, and the other one, the one that's currently living during the summer at home, is a biological anthropologist. She's getting her master's degree at Colorado State. Jenna, she's brilliant, and Jenna points out to me she recommends reading John Green's book about the evolution of man and technology that talks about, where are we in the stage of development and how fast are we annihilating ourselves in that regard. And one of the things that's pointed out in the evolution of society is that machines consume resources that man would otherwise need. Okay?
Yeah.
So I think that conflict is inevitable, and man has to make a decision about, am I going to want the convenience of a more sophisticated Siri, or am I going to want the ability to be able to eat and be able to do the things I do? There are limited resources.
We aren't being given the choices; they're just happening.
Well, no, I think we are given the choices, and the choices begin. When the choices begin to directly affect us, people take action. And I go back to history.
I can easily argue against that.
Well, I mean,
if we talk about climate change, we see what's happened, but yet there's still nothing that's being done
about climate change.
Right.
That's true.
It's like the inevitable. We're just walking towards our doom.
We are in a lot of different ways, but the AI and the use of power and water by AI is a much more noticeable accelerator than the fossil fuel problems that we're having. Okay, it's a lot more accelerating. It's a lot bigger acceleration because it affects socioeconomics and it affects environmental in ways that people yet don't see, but it's going to be impacting it more directly.
That argument is also made for mining, for Bitcoin mining, for example, right? Yeah. Putting up those servers, it's a drain
on the resources of the country.
So you're saying those similar kind of drains, AI requires that similar amount.
A lot more. Really? Look this up. Look up the amount of kilowatts that an AI system would need for it to properly operate. Now, don't get me wrong. In every society, in every part of American history, oligarchs have been formed whenever new technology or new industries are being born. We saw that in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in America, with Getty and the Rockefellers and all the others that went against each other, whether it was steel, whether it was in fact oil. But at the end of the day, when the American people begin to see that this isn't something that's necessarily healthy for them, the politicians begin to take action. And ironically enough,
maybe. But are you
Trump is one of those changes.
We're talking about something. We're creating fear around something that's new. I can make the argument also and tell you that back when the internet first came around, there were people that were naysayers saying, this is a fad, this is not good for us, this is bad, this is horrible.
I don't think it's a fad.
And look where we are today. I don't think we could live without the internet if you just took it away from us now.
I don't think this is a fad. But the internet wasn't thinking for you. Okay? The internet was a source of information, and it's predecessor to AI. You cannot have AI without the internet, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. And it's an evolutionary part of the development of technology and information age that now begins. Now, when somebody developed fire, okay, they learned how to cook. So they were able to eat more animals and be able to get more proteins into their brains, and human evolution occurred a lot faster.
Yeah.
Okay? And then they developed the wheel. They were able to transport, they were able to move, they were able to do other things, right? And then somebody came along and developed steam engines. Okay? And then they cut off a lot of forest to be able to get the steam engine rolling. And then somebody came up with electricity, and then transistors, and then everything else started developing at a very rapid rate. In 150 years, more development had occurred. Now, remember the rule where technology doubled every year? Well, this is no back in the 90s. That's what they tell us. Every 4 years, technology double. Well, technology is doubling every couple of months, and it's accelerating at a rate that, social laws and other things are not simply not catching up with it. Now, obviously, AI is not a fad. All right, why? Look, you know how AI originally was developed? It was developed by somebody, I forgot the guy's name. It was a scientist that was trying to map the human brain. Okay. And in mapping the human brain, he figured out that there are certain things that you can do that allows you to function in a way. I forgot the other things that he did, but I saw something about this. The bottom line is that we now have a machine that's capable of mimicking a human mind, right? So we can get into a lot more discussion about the international economics part of it. In other words, the evolution of capitalism into socialism, into other parts, whether it's Leninism or what the Chinese are doing in terms of central government. But at the end of the day, we're experiencing so much change in one time that is very similar to what we experienced at the turn of the 20th century, the beginning of the 20th century. And look what happened at the 20th century. You had two major world wars. The Great Depression. You had a lot of different things that were happening. And unfortunately for where we are today, I think that, as we know, people don't understand this, but history does really repeat itself. So that's my caution.
Yeah.
That's my caution. And do I have faith in the Republic, the American Republic? Yeah, I do, actually. Why? Because I know that at the end of the day, we always get lucky. People do not understand how lucky this country gets by having the right leadership. People are thoughtful. And, they're being called the deep state. But the fact is, these are people who think on a national, international level and think about what's in the best interest of the United States and act on it. So are we going through a period now where the oligarchs are rising? Yes. Do I think that money talks and everything else is taking second? Yes. Do I think that there is a countervailing movement that's likely to take place? The answer is yes. Now, what people don't understand is that whoever starts that technology doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to master it. Okay? And that's something you got to pay attention to. Let's take, for example, the development of ChatGPT, right? Well, the Chinese went out and developed DeepSeek for $30 million,
They
right?
sure did.
Even though the other people spent hundreds of billions of dollars to do it. And then some kids in Berkeley spent, $30,000 to do it? So the point is, once these algorithms are out there and once these things are refined, right, you're going to see unpredictable circumstances in which this technology is no longer controlled by a minutia of groups. Okay, so whoever thinks they can predict the future is either on dope, or because nobody can. No one can predict circumstances, particularly black swans, right?
Yeah.
Nobody can predict the anomalies that are going to occur in history because we don't have the capacity to do it. And to me, there's not a computer on Earth that I think can really predict black swans. Why? Because that's what they are. They're black swans.
By definition.
By definition. So it's very difficult
unaccounted
to do.
for.
But going back to the real estate field, right?
You're right.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. We diverge. The real estate field is an incredible field to be in, okay? Particularly now, and the demands that are being met by the industry is something that we all need to work with. Now, the changes are coming in terms of everything else. But as far as the fundamental question we started out diverging into this is, are there enough homes?
Right.
Okay? And I think that the way we develop homes has to change. Technology is evolving in terms of production of homes. And you're going to see a lot of these things. And also, I think that we have to be careful in that we don't overproduce homes, right? I mean, there are countries, people don't understand this, Ali, but there are countries around the world where they're giving you money to move there. And this is the part that blows.
In fact, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think in China there are entire cities that
are
built,
vacant, that are built for nothing.
They built them and said, if we build it, they will come. They just never came.
Never came.
Yeah.
That's right. And it's not just that, but here's something that people don't understand. Okay, the United Nations and people who are developing models on human population speculate by 2070 you'll see the peak of human population. You're beginning to see it in certain regions. For example, Eastern Europe is dying, literally dying. The Japanese are literally dying off. And it's the societies that have homogeneous groups that are thriving. Okay, and here's the irony of where we are in history today. We are restricting immigrants to come in when, in fact, we need people in this country to grow the country and grow its economy and protect the social compact that started out by Franklin Delano Roosevelt in terms of Social Security, Medicaid, and other things, in bringing younger workers in. And what people don't understand, and this is my own personal philosophy, is that this is what made America great to a large extent. Now, what made America great also is slavery. It's the abuse of humans, and the terrible tragedy, right? And the failure to recognize the role of who built this country. This country was built on the back of slaves. And they were built on the railroads were built on the back of the Chinese Americans, or the Chinese that were brought in, and but what really made this country is the understanding, okay, of these circumstances, how to cope with them. Okay, so bringing people in is an important factor. Just look at Eastern Europe for a minute, right? Ukraine is being depopulated, and one of the reasons experts say Russia went into war with Ukraine was because Russia was running out of people that would be able to fight in 15 to 20 years, and they wanted to secure their borders. But who's been the beneficiary of the Ukrainian war, population-wise? Poland. People migrated from Ukraine and Russia into Poland. Poland was dying until the Ukrainian war started, right? Now look at Italy. Italians are slowly depopulating. All of these countries are beginning to depopulate. And the only population growth is occurring where?
It's in India and China.
Well, no, the Chinese are not growing as rapidly, so they're beginning to peak. And I think the number was that 30 or 40% of China's population at some point in 2060 will be over the age of 60 years old. This is why the Chinese are building dark factories. This is why the Chinese are relying on robots to build manufactured products and not relying on human labor anymore. And that's they made that, the Central Committee made that decision about 5 or 6 years ago, and to their credit, they've been able to get it up and rolling very quickly. So it's the population in sub-Saharan Africa. Nigeria is, we were talking to a friend of yours who was here earlier, who works with the Westland, who is from Nigeria, and Nigeria's population growth is extraordinary. And people don't understand that in order for human society and for a country to develop, you need to be able to grow. You need to be able to bring in population. And here's the irony of life, right? We've got a president now who is literally gutting our universities. Okay? Yep. I mean, my daughter is going to be a PhD candidate next year, right? She's going to apply to PhD. She's going abroad. When you lose somebody like Jenna to Oxford or to Cambridge or to one of the schools in Germany, right? What does that say about your society? So we need to reverse this trend. We need to be able to have smart immigration, right? The Canadians, to their credit, they're adding 1 million people next year to their population, and they're capable of being very selective on who they're doing it and how they're doing it. And so smart immigration that looks at the national interest is something that needs to be done. And I think we can all look at that. This isn't a partisan issue. This isn't a Democrat or Republican or whatever you want to call yourself. This is not it. This is about what's in the best interest of the United States.
Yeah, but you mentioned that, okay, we have to be cautious not to overbuild, right?
Homes.
We're talking about homes.
Yeah.
And making sure that we're not, I don't think it's a matter of, partly the problem is there are not enough homes.
Yeah.
The other part of the problem
But why is that not enough homes?
Why is there not enough homes?
Why is there not enough homes?
I think there's multiple reasons. One is I think the cost of construction has gone up significantly.
Okay.
The other part is when some homes are being constructed or communities that are being constructed now, they're being constructed by corporations with the intent not to sell those homes, but rather to rent them out instead.
Correct. So when the hedge funds about 10 years ago started entering, and the trend started, Ahmed Fawaz and I watched this happen. Yeah. The trend started when there was a collapse in 2006, right, where companies like banks, major banks were forced, Bank of America, for example, was forced to buy back the loans, right? Well, these banks found a method of giving some of those loans getting them off their books to who? To hedge funds. And these hedge funds foreclosed, worked out whatever they. But in the end, another set of hedge funds walked in and bought these homes, right? So it took an economic decline, a recession, a deep recession, to be able to make that change happen, and it's still suffering from it. Now, the other problem that we have is that we're sort of having a hangover from the after party of too much money in the market. That's really fundamentally what's going on.
Yeah.
The Federal Reserve, since the beginning of Obama's administration, has been in control of the U.S. economy by regulating interest rates to the level where they controlled economic means, right? They had to take over the control because of the divisions that occurred in this country, where Congress was not able to make decisions about what's in the best interest of the United States.
Yeah.
And so what happened after, right, immediately, with COVID, they unleashed more money, right? And unleashing more money at a very low interest rate, now the Federal Reserve, beginning in 2022, said enough's enough, and they started holding back some of those, and the interest rates went up, right? And then, meanwhile, you had all these other factors come into play with, by the way, cost of materials is sort of, except for now, where the Trump administration is increasing tariffs, generally the cost of materials under Biden's last year and a half were beginning to stabilize. You can buy lumber from Canada, you can buy all kinds of things from Canada and other places that allow that to stabilize. But again, there is competition for the average American against. It's what it is. It's hedge fund competition.
Competing against the hedge
Correct.
funds. So it's not even a matter of, there aren't enough homes out there. There are.
Yeah.
Hedge funds have just decided to buy them up and rent them to you.
Correct.
Versus making them available to purchase. So it might not even be a construction issue or a builder issue. It's
Exactly.
more of a accessibility issue because
it's a dysfunction. It's a dysfunction in the system.
Yes.
Because I think the system failed to recognize that the priority here is part of the American Compact. Mm-hmm. The priority of the American Compact, where there's every person should be given an opportunity to own a home, is a fundamental value. And the only way to really scare the government into acting in this is something dramatically bad to happen. Politicians only react when they're forced to react. And the other sick part, people got to understand that this country is not the same country from the 1990s.
No, it's not.
When the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that corporations are individuals for purposes of donating money on the Citizens, I forgot the name of the case, forgive me, as a lawyer, it's sometimes difficult. Citizens United, I think it's called. Yes. That particular case ruled that corporations are able to funnel. And I blame every president that has come along after that. And it started with Bill Clinton, ironically, in terms of him, foregoing, using federal funds for his campaign and moving forward. It increased tremendously under Bush, and Obama blew it out of the water. Obama completely changed the rules on how to raise money, and he, to my opinion, caused catastrophe to this country. And then here comes Trump. In April 2024, Trump had a meeting with the oligarchs that are now in charge. And I'm sorry, the meeting with Trump occurred after the meeting with Biden, when Biden told them, I read this in the New York Times, Biden told them, we're going to take control of AI.
Yeah.
They walked out of that meeting saying, well, thank you, Mr. President. They went to Elon Musk, who began organizing in favor of Trump, and Trump has now given him the keys. You got to do the research on this.
Yeah.
You got to do the research. But as usual, time flies by.
Time does fly by. So how do we fix this? So part of the other problem, we talk about money is usually at stake here, or part of the issue, right? It's those who have versus those who don't. And if you have the money, therefore you also potentially have access to lobby groups, or if you've created a lobby group, that's who's lobbying on your behalf. Yeah. So these hedge funds, I'm sure they've got lobby groups arguing on their behalf. Mm-hmm. Who's arguing in favor of the people?
I've sat down with Democrats, okay, because I'm a Democrat. I've sat down with the guy who's now the current chair of the party, Curtis Sartell. I've had this conversation with a number of members of Congress. Your question is, how do you change this? It has to be a multi-tier change. And in all honesty, the system is broke fundamentally. Mm-hmm. People think that, the Democrats are addicted to corporate money. Republicans are addicted to oligarchs' money. And, then comes along a guy who talks about himself being a populist, to quote one of the people, right? And this man's a billionaire who has complete I mean, he's raking in billions and tens of billions of dollars, and his family is enriching themselves. How do we stop this? I'm not optimistic, because I think that once you unleash that genie, the genie being the amount of money that's being poured into government and into politics, can't put it back in the bottle. And so,
so are we in
so the question
oligarchy model now? Is that what our future holds?
But in the past, we had never had competition on a global scale, at least until from the beginning of the 1890s. America started exposing the world to its dominance. Okay. And there had been two competing systems. You had communism, right? And some derivatives of socialism. And then you had capitalism. The Americans have been, as America, we've been able to, control capitalism so that people benefit on a larger scale by the creation of the middle class, right? And that's how we've kept the system in stability and checks and balances. But the wheels kind of come off on that. And so the question of the competitor is looking right at us in the eye. And the competitor is a centralized government in which changes can occur very quickly in terms of adjustments. Hence, this is the Chinese Central Party, but only one party. So we have a contest between our society that has multiple parties in which it's difficult to make any changes or come to consensus, versus a society where there's one party and the debate is very limited to what's in the best interest of the people and they execute very quickly. And to me, that's the battle of this century. Is Karl Marx or Vladimir Lenin correct in their evolution of Leninism and the evolution of communism? Or is Adam Smith and Hamilton and some of the other founders of this country are going to be correct? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. And it's impossible to be able to come up with a definitive solution when you're entering the same phase of technological evolution we've started this podcast talking about. And that is the advent of extraordinary computing power and the advent of AI. I mean, ironically, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first advent of AI in terms of impact on people occurred where? In Gaza.
Yeah, true.
AI's first example of use was in the murder and genocide of Gaza. And the irony of that is mind-boggling to me, because how did the nuclear era begin? By the bombing of Nagasaki and the other city. And so to me, I think there's some parallelism there that shows that indeed this advent of new technology has had some horrible, horrible consequences that I think society is yet to wrap its mind about. And the ironic part is that its demonstrable capability came at the cost of tens of thousands of lives and the genocide and the annihilation of a people. To me, the paradoxes are incredible. But again, you can control nuclear technology. You can control, the source of the, uranium and whatnot and enrichment. But how are you going to control the evolution of AI in a way where the thing is thinking on its own? It's going to be eventually making its own decision. Right. And it's already been demonstrated that it can kill people.
Yeah, we saw this movie or multiple movies.
I mean, these are the things that keep me up at night, and thankfully, I can.
I mean, Elon Musk still to this day says we should not trust AI. So,
Elon.
He those words.
Well, no, I think the founder of AI said those exact words. I mean, I think 60 Minutes did a story about him, an interview lasted about 30, 35 minutes. People should look up. I don't remember the episode, but it aired about 6 months ago, where the guy was giving a warning of the consequences of this. And the fact that, companies like Palantir and the Defense Department and Israeli intelligence, who helped significantly develop this program and develop the AI that would able to kill people without a trial and executions by the masses. What does that mean? What does that mean to society? And what's going to happen to when this stuff really gets out of control?
I think so.
But that's a whole different subject.
I know we need to wrap things up, but I think that's a subject. Yeah, as you said, it's a whole different subject. However, I think we haven't even had enough conversation around that. Yeah. I don't think the people have had enough time to wrap their brain around.
Well, here's what has to happen. Okay, you asked a question. When you're talking to folks, have them begin looking and reading about this. I think information unbiased information. Go to your library, man. Go read a book. But unbiased, and I'm a library commissioner, so I support that 100%. In Dearborn, I'm a library commissioner.
Nice.
And so I think that if you go read books and you understand the nature of what's happening and pay attention to what government is doing, right? That's how you begin. You begin by doing things like these podcasts, where you begin to bring people and you have people become aware of this stuff. Because awareness is the number one thing necessary for anything to be done. Look, my biggest American hero was Benjamin Franklin. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because the son of a gun was smart. He was smart, he was ingenious, frankly, he was devious. But he also saw the big picture on how to set up a democracy, how to set up, things that need to be set up. Thomas Jefferson was a hypocrite, but he also understood human rights, right? So, there's an imperfection in man anywhere you go, or woman anywhere you go. But at the end of the day, we've always done the right thing to allow this country to move forward. And despite the horrible things that have happened, we still are a country with an incredible amount of potential. And I think the way to get this rolling, is to people to research, to people to understand, and people not to believe the utter bullshit that you're fed, and you think that, they assume that you don't know, which is a falsity.
Right. Yeah, there is definitely that assumption.
Yeah.
How about we lighten the mood a little bit as we wrap things up? And I've got some fun, thought-provoking questions for you.
Yes,
rapid
sir.
questions for
Yes,
you.
Sir.
If real estate law was a TV show,
Yeah.
what genre would it be?
Oh boy.
Courtroom drama, dark comedy, humor?
It depends on the type. I think you can spread it all over there, right? All over that genre. But to me, I don't be emotional about it. Look at it from a black and white perspective. Everything has advantages and disadvantages.
Like a documentary then.
Yeah, it is. It's just look at it from the advantage and disadvantage. And if you think you can guess the future, in other words, you're going to try to guess what the home value is going to go up or down, you're wasting your time. Right. Trust me, I've tried wasting my time on that point, and it's never worked out. But at the end of the day, do what's in your best interest. That's what I see it. So in terms of genres, I think it's all over the place, depending who you're dealing with on the other side and how it's going to be. But I like to see it as a serious drama, because it's a serious issue for people's lives.
Fair enough. We'll take that. Yeah. Finish this sentence. Mm-hmm. If I had $1 for every time someone forgot to read the fine print, I'd be
a billionaire.
I believe that.
I love my community, but man, people don't read.
Final one for you. What's one moment in your career where you saw the law protect someone who really needed it, and it reminded you why you do this work?
Oh, I see that every day. Look, I've been practicing since 1992, so that's 33 years, right? And the number one reason I became a lawyer is to actually help people. I really do. I'd say about 20% of my practice is pro bono, excluding Mr. Fawaz, of course. At the end of the day, you do your best to try to do what's fair and right for people. And ironically enough, that comes back and pays dividends, right? Because it spreads the right aura around people. And if you want to live in a world where poison is everywhere, then be a jerk. But if you want to be in a world where things can get done and people are treated correctly, do the right thing. And Warren Buffett said something that I've always repeated. Okay, he said there's not a contract on earth that you can have a scoundrel tied to. Which is true. I don't care. There's not a contract. He's right.
Yeah.
If you're going to try to enforce a contract and the other person or the woman is a scoundrel, don't do it. Do not enter into agreements with people you don't believe can do things. Do not sign contracts, no matter how wonderful the deal looks. Do not sign a contract if you think that person just has bad intentions. Because you're just sitting there and wasting your time. Yeah. And, the effort that you have to put into litigating it, the effort that you put into enforcing it in court is just not worth it. Just don't sign the deal. Go find something else to do with your life that's much better, more rewarding than this.
That's some great advice.
And so I give that advice all the time to people, particularly when I come in and I begin to smell a rat. Yeah. And, growing up in this area, growing up in Dearborn, particularly, having some South End in me, Dearborn South End in me gives me the ability to have a pretty good nose for rats. And I've been smelling them for a long time. And the minute you see somebody who just doesn't have goodwill or good intention, just walk away, man. Mm-hmm. There's nothing you can do that would make you a winner there.
Yeah.
Even the best contract on earth.
That's probably winning is walking away.
Winning is walking away.
You can have the most finished and finite, locked up contract, but you still have to deal with that other individual.
Yeah. Do you want to do it? Do you want to spend a year in court doing depositions, having argued motions, spend tens of thousands of dollars, and then it's just a lot of energy for nothing. I mean, I do litigation.
So trust your gut.
Trust your gut. I do a lot of litigation, and I'd say about 70% of litigation is a waste of time. I mean, God, we were in court on Friday, and this other lawyer was getting paid a tremendous amount of money, and he was just wasting it. We talked to him on Wednesday. We offered him the same deal. We offered him on Wednesday. The money ended up taking 6 hours later in court when we talked about it. And it happens a lot.
Yeah.
There are no good deals if the other party is not good.
Yeah.
Okay? Trust me on this.
Yeah. It usually comes back down to, are they dealing in good faith?
They're not. I mean, if they're not, if they're not dealing in good faith, right? Then don't deal with them at all. Yeah. Do not deal with them at all because it's not worth it. Yeah. Particularly if they're going to be partners with you, particularly if they're going to be doing things with you. And for the love of God, please don't use accountants to draft agreements for you or people who do immigration. These immigration consultants, they create disasters. And these accountants who don't know what they're doing create even bigger disasters. And believe me, you may walk out with only paying a few $100, but man, you're going to be one sorry person a year from now. And I'm looking at, they keep lawyers in business.
Yeah.
All right. I know we got to wrap it up. I apologize.
Yes, no worries. You're all good. So I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you.
That is a wrap on today's episode of The Real Deal with Empire. A big thanks to Ali Dagher for dropping his knowledge, reminding us that in real estate, what you don't know can actually absolutely hurt you. If you're buying, selling, investing, or just curious about what the legal side of real estate how that actually works, this is the kind of conversation that you want to have in your back pocket.
Be careful. One last point.
Yeah.
1989, right? My first day of contracts law. And contracts law for lawyers is like one of the fun classes. And my daughter got to experience that with an amazing professor she had at Northwestern Law School. But Leon Lysat was my professor. He said there are two things you remember. And I swear to God, it's about the only two things I remember in law school. He said, it only takes a second for you to sell your soul, right? You can only sell your soul once. It only takes seconds for you to put your name on a piece of paper and lifetime to remove it.
That's deep. That's good.
It's deep and simple. It's real.
It really is.
It's really real. Thank you, Adi.
Thank you for that knowledge.
Thanks for Empire Realty for having, and I had a blast.
Appreciate you. Thank you. And hopefully we can have you back again sometime. If you guys will, make sure you're subscribed to the episode. Leave some feedback for us. Hit the follow button. And I'm Ali Fawaz, as always, keeping it real. And we're keeping it with Empire. Catch you guys next time.